We typically work with teams that are looking to increase the collaboration and communication between teams, empower their frontline teams to really break open that paradigm that exists in a lot of contact centers where it's quite command and control, layers of hierarchy, decision-making concentrated with leaders, and help them find a way to improve the engagement with their teams by distributing that decision-making and that autonomy to them so they can control the work, have that decision-making power over how that work gets done. And a great example here is a team running a daily stand-up, which is not uncommon these days, I've got to say. Lots of teams are running stand-ups these days, but the unique thing about this team is it's being run by the team, and they're having a conversation about their schedules and their breaks for the day and how the work's going to get done, which channels they're going to work on. It's a beautiful example of letting people who do the work own the work. And we see such wonderful results when teams start to embrace some of these principles in everything that they do. And it's not always easy. It comes with a little bit of pain and heartache when you're trying to breaking those paradigms and making those shifts. But the results are beautiful when you see them. So that's a little bit about us and what we do. And of course, there is a lot more information you can find about us on our website, so you can check that out as well. But I'll introduce myself. I am going to talk a bit about my story a little bit. But my name is Sean McGinn, the director of the Agile Contact Centre. I've been working with the team here now for about 1.5 years. And before that, I spent the rest of my career, really grew up in contact centres and operational teams. And love it so much that I decided to go out on my own and work with the team. Work with Arnie and Eduardo and the team at the Agile Contact Centre, and also our sister company, New 21, who work with the rest of the organisation. You can check them out as well. But I feel privileged that I've spent so much time working with contact centres and operations teams. It's given me a chance to see every part of the organisation, but also to see what's possible. I worked in a very traditional way for a lot of my career, and only, as I'll talk about shortly, only in more recent times I would say that I've discovered a new way to think and work at contact centres. So that's what we aim to bring you today, a little bit of that goodness, so you can see what the opportunities could be for you. So that's me, Arnie.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, just really quickly about me. I'll be moderating today's chat, so Sean will talk a little bit about that in a moment. But for me, I work as a New 21 consultant, the sister company of the Agile Contact Center, which gives me the opportunity to also work with the Agile Contact Center clients as well. My experience is in contact centers. Like many of you probably here, you've come through the contact center ranks. And I sort of did that until I discovered new ways of working with the Agile Contact Center, and got to see it from the client side, got to do it and actually feel it and see the great results. As Sean mentions here on the slide here, that the place that I worked at, we became a humanistic, customer-focused destination. And shortly after, I had the opportunity to start working with other contact centers, but other teams as well, as a consultant today. So excited to be here and to share these wonderful thoughts from this group with everyone here in the audience.
Very good. Thanks, Arnie. I do need to mention, you'll notice an absence. We did have Jake Potts scheduled to join us today, but unfortunately at the last minute, due to some personal reasons, he's had to make an apology. So he's very disappointed he can't join us, and wishes us all the best. So as Arnie said, he will be moderating today's conversation. It is I suppose a typical panel conversation. I have some questions that we're going to throw at our two panelists, Hefin and Rach, but we are encouraging everyone to engage with the conversations. Arnie, keep an eye on the chat. Hefin and Rach will dive into the chat too. Share your thoughts. What are your reactions to what we're talking about? And of course, if you have questions you'd like us to pose as well. And Arnie will keep an eye on those and weave those seamlessly into the conversation as we go. And we do have a survey at the end, so just keep that in mind. Don't forget, we are really looking for your feedback to make this better for next time. So look out for that at the end. But let's dive into it. But I do want to set the scene before we do that, because and I try not to use any cliches, but I can't promise it. But 2020 it's been one of those years. All right, it has thrown a lot at everyone, no matter whether you're like Rach in New Zealand or Hefin and the rest of us in Australia. It has been a year to remember, and it has been incredibly disruptive. But it has also presented us with a lot of opportunity. It's challenged the way that we think about work. It's challenged a lot of the paradigms that we've always worked under. And the great example that I love is contact centers up until this point, probably 90% of them didn't have a working from home plan. Maybe they could stand up a couple of people if they had to, but in the space of 4 weeks, pretty much every single contact center in the whole of the country was working from home. Now that is just unheard of. It's a testament to how contact centers are able to get things done. You know, that spirit of being able to, you know, make things work is what contact centers are made of. So, you know, it's been an amazing year from that perspective. But that level of disruption kind of reminds me of when I was running a contact center at MeBank, and we didn't have a pandemic, but we were going through an incredible period of growth. We were going through a rebrand. We were launching new vision and values, a new core banking platform, a new internet banking platform, and there was restructures happening across the organization as well to accommodate that. And then, of course, the contact center was in the middle of all of that. So, you know, imagine trying to run and you guys would all feel this, try to run a BAU, you know, run your operation with all of that disruption trying to hit you. It's very, very challenging. Now, all of that stuff that was happening was very exciting, but at the time, myself and my team, we didn't have the ways of working or the tools to be able to manage that. And so, you know, sometimes it wasn't that pretty, but we got through it. But I also at that time started to experiment with these new ways of thinking and working. And that was when I met Eduardo, and he was very generous and showed me what he was doing out at REA. And maybe it's crazy, but trying to, in the midst of all of that disruption, then try to introduce new ways of working. Because I saw that potential in people that was just being locked in, and the concentration of responsibility and decision-making with leaders that was really hampering them from being able to be their best as well. So deep down in my heart, in my head, I knew that we had to change. Something had to change. And so we started to experiment and play around with these new ways of working. We looked at our planning, our forecasting, the way we managed and engage people with change, how we looked at customer experience and the waste and the demand from customers. And the things we put in place slowly but surely started to work. And they worked because they were adaptive. They were ways of working that were adaptive and actually resilient to change. So lots of things don't work too well when there's change. All the best laid plans can fall apart, but these ways of looking at running the operation actually thrive in times of change. And it's this disruptive change that I think is the number one challenge for contact centers. Sure, there are some symptoms that we're seeing now around, you know, productivity or well-being, but if you look beneath the surface, I believe it's that disruptive change that is really the number one challenge for contact centers, that ability to manage the BAU and all that change that hits you, whether it's the internal change from projects or, you know, whether it's coming from outside the organization. It's not easy, but that's why we work in contact centers. That's why we love it. So that's probably a good segue then into two amazing thought leaders that we have with us today, Heffen and Rach, from two of the world's biggest organizations, Philips Healthcare, who've obviously been in the midst of COVID, as you can imagine, and Shopify, for different reasons, also very much impacted by COVID. So really privileged to hear them talk about what we see as this new frontier of not just contact centers, but customer service, customer experience, and experience management, which I know is something Heffen's really focused on. So we want to explore some of those emerging trends and practices today. And as Arnie said, really want to encourage you guys to engage in this conversation so we can hear from you and it's not just one-sided. So with that said, I will introduce our panel. So Rach, I'm going to start with you. Tell everyone a little about who you are, where you work, what you do, and also it'd be great to know how do you feel your team is feeling at the moment in terms of their level of engagement and productivity?
Oh, tēnā koutou everybody, I'm Rachel, and I am the Geo lead, which is basically the head of New Zealand support for Shopify, yeah, I guess my career I identify as a leadership specialist. I started my career as a leader in a contact center and have spent most of it outside of a contact center environment, except for the last kind of 8 or so years when I've been working. I used to be the head of support for a very iconic Kiwi company called TradeMe. And yeah, our team, well, we were already working from home. So you may think not too much change with COVID, but actually, of course, we suddenly had new colleagues in our homes, which was a change for us. And so that was a change, but also from a work volume perspective, we have been very connected to our purpose and our mission, which is to help businesses around the world to make money. And so many businesses have been coming online, and so right from the start, we have been very connected to our purpose, and felt a real privilege to be part of that economic recovery, and to supporting businesses to thrive during this time. So it's been busy. We're about to, next weekend is our busiest peak of the year, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so we're really busy. We're ready for the Christmas holidays. But yeah, we're feeling very engaged by, and privileged to be part of what's happening in the world at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks, Rach. And one of the coolest titles I've heard as well, Geo Lead. Sounds like something from Doctor Who. Hefin, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Sean. So yeah, I head up the service business for Philips across Australia and New Zealand. And so my background really is in general management, I guess, in a traditional sense, but with a real passion for trying to develop people, but also drive change. It really is a passion of mine to continually improve and try and be better. Better personally, better with our people, and essentially better than our opposition in the field where we operate. So that's a major part of what we do. So, as you said, a disruptive year, but being in healthcare and in medtech in particular, clearly right in the very middle of it. And with regards to the team, I think it's a fairly large team. It's a decentralized team anyway. A whole load of engineers, service engineers, planners, contact center specialists, sales, marketing across the board. And we've always run a fairly decentralized aspect. But with that, obviously, came the initial anxiety because we were expecting our team to essentially go to healthcare sites and centers to maintain equipment, to install equipment, etc., around the board. So a fair bit of anxiety early in the piece, but a tremendous team who really took it on board and have driven some incredible outcomes, been incredibly adaptable during the year, and generally given us a pretty good engagement outcomes and responses right now.
Cool. I think, we're again very lucky to have you both here, given how long you have had your team set up remote, and remote in very different ways as well. And also, from those COVID impacts, you've certainly felt those. So let's get into the discussion. We are going to jump in and ask Rach the first question. So Rach, Hefin, I should say. Hefin, what trends have you seen with your team's productivity in the last 6 months?
Yeah, we'll touch a bit on this, I think, later on with regards to productivity per se. But clearly for us, it's been a high activity year. It's been a high activity year because we've needed to be there, right, for healthcare across Australia and New Zealand. A lot of being almost ready as well, right? We're touch wood, and thanks to the society in both countries, we've managed to stave off some of the worst, I think, of the pandemic in comparison to some of our global colleagues. Nevertheless, both countries have been ready for the potential outcome of the pandemic, and so we've really needed to be there. So from an outcome perspective, it's been a high activity. What we've seen, though, a lot is really an improvement in sort of that remote. So you spoke at the start, Sean, about the disruptiveness. Sometimes disruptive can be quite good. Some of us as leaders have been talking about the need to improve skills and technology in the remote sort of engagement, and whether it's purely for productivity or simply improving experience and outcomes. That's really had to kick forward this year by the very nature of not being able to travel across borders and people needing to not get on the flight that we may have traditionally done in order to help each other, but to utilize some platforms in order to do that. So throughout the year, I think by and large it's been quite positive. We're fortunate, of course. Most people who join a healthcare company really do it for the positive reason of making a difference, even if that's just simply having a system up and running for a longer period of time than it would normally be the case. So the team have really got on with it particularly well this year.
And when I say productivity, how do you think about that?
Yeah, look, Sean, I've got a bit of a challenge often with the word productivity. I think it's too often used in a very dirty form. So I tend to be more focused on, hey, what are we doing for the outcome? And so what we mean by that in our space is how do we ensure that our customers, who are almost all healthcare professionals, whether they're in the private or the public sector, have more clinical time on their systems? How do we avoid those systems being down for a longer period of time than they need to be, in our view? So by and large, that's the sort of thing we measure. Interestingly, probably the biggest effect that we've had on our ability to have systems up if they've gone down, for example, something we refer to as time to system up, has been more around freight channels, not necessarily directly controllable by us, but some of these factors that have otherwise affected it. But from a productivity perspective, looking at the sort of outcome drive that we're talking up, and trying to reduce, if you like, the customer demand. So we measure more of that rather than productivity in the traditional format of, how many hours are people doing, how many calls can they do in a day, etc. We're actually trying to measure it by reducing demand and better outcome for our customers. So focusing on that customer outcome rather than activity, if you like.
Brilliant. That's great. So let's then flip over to the engagement side now. And Rach, you want to talk to us a little bit about culture? How do you build culture remotely?
Yeah, sure. I think the word I would use is intentionally. So I think that for a lot of us and a lot of you, if you've, like you said at the start, Sean, if you've just kind of been thrown into working from home without much warning, what we naturally try and do is recreate the office, but it's sort of like instead of a first-rate digital experience, it's a second-rate in the office experience. And we kind of need to flip that round and actually say, well, what can we do to create a really human, digital-first cultural experience? And so that's intentional. So it's actually being thoughtful about exactly what you're doing and how you are creating that. So focusing on a great human experience is not just about the work, it's about relationships. And, also just being really clever about our kind of perks and benefits and how we set everything up. So we just do it intentionally from a people first experience. That's what I would say.
That's fantastic. So, yeah, when I think about the days when I used to work in an office, you have all those serendipitous moments where you bump into someone and you might solve a problem, or, it might spark an idea, nail that person down that hasn't accepted a meeting from you for 2 weeks, whatever it might be. So maybe just jumping to that, what are your thoughts on that? How do you recreate those moments?
Yeah. So, we use a tool called Slack, which is basically how I would recreate that particular moment that you just used, that you just described. It's a very great way to democratize, because you can slide into anyone's DMs that you like, and you can have it. So just a few minutes before coming into this, somebody sent me a Slack and said, "Hey, Rachel, I heard you were talking about X, Y, and Z. I just wanted to give you some feedback about that project." And they sent a screenshot from something that someone in their team had shared about a presentation that they'd done, and it's just like that. And I could just reply back, with an emoji just as I was walking into this meeting and say, "Great, I'll have a look at that in a minute." So it's sort of recreating that exact same experience of bumping into someone in a hallway, but even better because they can screenshot the exact feedback that they got, or send a little video, or you can kind of do the same thing, but better, I think.
Yeah. We've just got a good question in the chat from Martine, which is perfect timing, because I've got a bit of a follow-up for Heffen, which is that paradigm around needing to see people or hear the work, kind of physically experience it to know that the work's happening. That mindset shift from that traditional way of moving it to outcomes. How do you take people on that journey? Because a lot of people, and it's not being critical, but we've all grown up in that sort of environment, I suppose. How do you help people make that mindset shift?
Yeah, it's a good point, and not easy, I think, is the first answer, right? So I'm here to learn as much as share some thoughts on this one. But I think you have to make it your focus. So we made a conscious decision. I started the role in its current form just over 2 years ago. We made a conscious decision that we would need to have experience as the core and a vision essentially of everything that we do, and it would be without equal. We talk about we talk about experience without equal every day, and I think by spending your time focusing on that, and I've got a customer experience lead who is particularly focused on driving that message along with us, but also learning quickly around experiences. So if we can learn quicker around the experience part of it, then we bring that to the forefront of everybody's thoughts. If you shift the metrics a little bit further back, now clearly we're in medtech, so we have no choice with some of these metrics, right? They're about quality, they're about regulatory. We can't avoid them. But there are metrics that are often related or feel related to productivity. And one of the things that I often challenge the teams is, how can we change our behavior so that today's productivity related metrics become yesterday's metrics, if you like, so we don't have to measure them in the future? How do we change our mindset to become ahead? So one of the things we're doing a lot about at the moment is, how do we become more predictive? That is, instead of things like the time to system up that we talk about at the moment, how quickly can we get a system that has gone down? How about we work in a manner that the system never goes down, or never in a way that is destructive to our customers? So it's about the mindset of actually shifting those metrics. If we feel that it's one of those dirty productivity metrics, what do we need to do different in order to not need that, if you like? So that's the kind of thought processes we kind of try and drive a lot of.
Yeah, and you mentioned something around purpose as well, using purpose to shift that. Rach, have you got some views around purpose and how you can use that to shift the mindset from maybe a more traditional way to more outcomes focus?
Yeah, totally. We have our company purpose, and we've broken that down to what our rallying goal is across the quarter, which we do. And then from there, we break that down into 4 defining objectives, and each of us work on those 4 things as a mission at different levels of abstraction. So for me, it's about creating the environment for each of those things, creating the system. And for our advisors, it's about how they can create, say if the goal is the merchant experience in New Zealand is second to none, then what can they do in each and every interaction to achieve that? And we, to your question, Martine, it's not that we don't have the metrics and we don't have the stats. We do. We've got them. But what we don't do is just say to people, hey, achieve this thing. Because that's actually, we all know that's not helpful. So, if you were at the personal trainer, what they're going to tell you. They're going to say, hey, run. But what you actually need help with is, okay, well, how do I do that? And how can you motivate me to do that? And so we focus on the goals, and it's actually, our leaders have to be better than just saying, this is the metric, achieve it. They have to actually create great goals and work and give great feedback and work with their teams to really achieve that. And so they don't talk about metrics much, because actually it's kind of like, that's irrelevant. If you're doing the goals, the metrics will come. And I guess at my level, I still see that, and we can use them as a tripwire, but we just don't use them as the stick to beat people with, I guess.
I love that. So you're breaking your purpose down into some clear objectives, making those objectives relevant for each role as you go through the organization, and then having some other metrics that you might use just to work out or tell you if you're heading in the right direction or not.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
I'd probably just add here the beauty of this and shifting the mindset is about how do you shift that accountability? It's actually about accountability. How do you shift that accountability of how your team is working, not from just the leaders, but to the people on the front line, right? And this is where purpose is really important, because if people aren't just thinking about one metric that they're just doing, I do this, you'll get people who are really dynamic and really thinking about how can they make a real difference, rather than I'm a robot and I just do this and I just look after my patch of grass. Christine's asked a really good question. I think kind of ties into this topic around productivity issues. And she asks, and I'm going to read it because I'm not going to try to paraphrase this, but I think it's a really great question. For thoughts on how to address productivity issues when the workload decreased due to the pandemic, opposite to what you've experienced, Hefin and Rachel. Staff getting used to reduced workload and finding it challenging to increase back to pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah, as you said, I'm not sure I'm the ideal person to answer that, because may not have experienced this sort of reduction. But I postulate a few things and maybe bring a couple of other thoughts. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is if we do get back, and we're here in Sydney, we're fortunate to be able to get back to the office should we wish to. The challenge about the different parts of the country, with some in offices and some not, and really have got used to, if you like, and we're talking going live here about, our back-to-back meetings truly being back-to-back now that they're remote. And one of the things that we've noticed, I've been in the office a little bit over the last couple of months, is that a lot of leaders in particular are in those meetings. And there's a risk when you're back in the office that you're literally taking yourself to a side office and you're in those meetings from 8 until 5, and then you leave the office. And so you actually don't benefit from some of the engagement aspects that would help share thoughts, knowledge, motivation, if it's required for something like we've been asked in the question there, Christine. That sort of balance between motivation and core drive, if you like, and understanding where that lies. And for me, it's one of the risks for us as leaders when we're going back, is if we don't tweak out of this, if you like, meeting to meeting sort of behavior that has become a little bit the norm during this pandemic, we will miss that opportunity to understand, okay, do we need to work as leaders on understanding somebody's drive, or maybe their motivation at this point in time?
Thanks, Hefin. I might just go back to you, Rach. We talked a little bit about building that culture remotely. What are some advice, maybe a couple of things that you would recommend that for anyone who's now contemplating what does that return to the office look like, or maybe it's a hybrid, I'm going to have some in the office, some at home, or even a completely remote workforce. What are your top 2 or 3 things they should be thinking about?
Top 1 with working from home is connection. And I think having relatively small teams is really important. Having, this sounds weird, but it's actually easy, but scheduling unscheduled times. So that again goes back to that intentional thing of, if we don't schedule it, the kind of unscheduled times where you would talk when you were on your way to the coffee shop or those kind of things, they don't happen, and so people miss that. So you need to actually schedule that in, so that still happens for your teams, and so it builds connection. I also think it's really important that we do create places where people can build connection by revealing things about themselves. That is something that's really important for our well-being. It tells our nervous system that we're okay, that we're safe, that we're able to share things with our colleagues. And that's something that you have to create space for, because that, again, it's not going to happen when you just jump into a Zoom call. You're not kind of like sharing something that you might do when you're making coffee next to somebody in the office. And, having a proper coaching practice where the leader's asking, how are you? And actually spending that time to connect, rather than just like agenda, here we go. So that's the first thing, connection. And I think setting up, I said this before, but setting up for digital first, creating that first digital being the experience that you're creating rather than a second-rate version in the office. We talked about purpose, really, really dialing that up. So to Christine's question, I'd say like dial up on purpose, really share as much as you can, like customer calls and those kind of things that will get people to kind of connect into purpose, because that really will drive people to want to get back to being more productive because they care about doing that work. Thinking about, like, I would say that you can't afford to do kind of what I would call lazy style management from home. So you can't just be like, oh, I've got a problem, I need to grab everyone in the room, which can be fine, but it's not. You have to be structured. You have to actually plan for things and be organized and set that up so that people are connected to outcomes and they know what to do, and they're not kind of looking to you in that really reactive way that you can probably get away with in the office. Yeah.
Just,
they're probably key things.
I'd probably just talk to that when you were talking about that structure. And one of the things that we talk about a lot with teams is having an operating rhythm. So I'm sure a lot of people have talked about that, right? Like, and often I see a lot of teams probably have one-on-ones or that fortnightly team meeting or whatever that might be. Those rhythms might need to change as you now go remote. Maybe that actually should be more frequent because you don't have an office. Okay, we're not seeing each other all that often. Well, maybe we need to do something daily. That's 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And that's where you've got those rhythms to help support those kind of problem-solving scenarios where we can't do it in the office. So that's that digital first mindset that Rachel's talking about. Just had a question from Kylie, and I've got another question there from Jessica that I do want to get to, which we've kind of alluded to. But Kylie's just asked, what do you consider to be a fairly small team?
Probably for a team lead, less than 10 or 10 or less. Yep. That's probably pretty normal in Australia and New Zealand. Internationally, it can be much bigger.
Okay.
So Kylie, please add, I'm sure you're going somewhere with that. So please add your next question or whatever it is. This could be a next really good question though to what we're talking about. Jessica, you mentioned what kind of new leadership skills do you think will evolve from here? And I think that's a fantastic question as we consider moving into 2021. What are these new leadership skills? Maybe we'll go to Hefin and then we can come back to Rachel on this.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Jess. So I think from my perspective, it's also one of those things that, carrying on a little bit from Rachel as well. It's about team dynamics, and traditionally we've always considered team dynamics to be present, and to do that digital is a bit awkward for many of us, right? It's a new skill to develop, and I can certainly talk about this, in terms of how can you be present with teams digitally, and it is a new leadership style for the vast majority of us who are used to either being present by simply being there, by being able to share some thoughts, or to lead in person, if you like, in that area. So from my perspective, some of the things that we have tried to digital touch points, if you like, in a sense. So we've never run more town halls, if you like, because we feel that we need to be closer. The ability to catch up with people and have a dinner when you're up with your Queensland team, or for me, when you're in South Australia, simply hasn't occurred this year. So you need those touch points and to drive that. We've never put out as many newsletters. So that information sharing, which we identified as a likely gap when you can't actually be in person with others. Other things like, the talent that you have in the team. So we've run far more leadership corners, all of them digitally. Sometimes we can get 3 or 4 in an office, but really, so that leadership style in terms of to try and increase those digital touch points, but as you said, Rachel, at the very start, being very, very deliberate about it as well. And you must consider this and be planned around it as well, while trying to ensure that you have an engagement. So how do you get that loop? Because the difficulty with digital, and obviously the crowd here is fantastic, they're all putting plenty of questions, but we've all also been there trying to engage with teams digitally, and you get nothing back, right? And it's easy for your remote teams to say, well, look, my connection isn't great today, so my video isn't on, so, you know, or I'm traveling or whatever it may be. So it can be quite difficult. So how do you intentionally create those loops? Have been some of the challenges we've been trying to work through and trying to pilot and play with really during the year.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of those things. And I think just something that's slightly different is I think that something that's different from working from home from in an office. In an office, an office tends to really attract like-minded individuals, and there's been some really interesting research that's been done that working from home is really great for introverted people, and that introverts are really rising to the top and excelling in when they can be the master or mistress of their own demand in their own home. And that's really interesting for the impact on leadership as well, because we know that traditionally a lot of the ways that we would describe leadership are around that charismatic kind of lead from the front, and that doesn't appeal to everybody. So I think this is a great leveler for those people who want to lead from the back and do leadership in a very different way that involves different skills around organization and connection and various different things that maybe traditionally we haven't celebrated. So it's pretty exciting times, or scary times, depending on the way that you are, I guess.
Perhaps equal measures. Actually, Rach, wouldn't mind if you don't mind sharing. What are some of the actual things that you do with your team, to those intentional things you're doing to connect with them?
Yeah, sure. Well, we have a bunch. We do have a very structured meeting routine, and our teams have different purposes. Like our meetings have different purposes. So we have a team time that we all do, even our frontline advisors, they do, and that we actually have 2 of them a week now. And one tends to be around worky things where they chat about, and the other thing is really just the other one is really about connection. We have things like we have a sidekick kind of tool that we use that pairs people up, and it means that you can have a chat like you would if you were just bumped into someone in a lift, kind of to your point before, Sean, and get to know people, and you can decide if you want to do that with people in your own time zone or internationally, and that kind of really builds that connection. We do a whole bunch of those things that, I guess probably everyone would think of around, having a wind down on, have a drink or whatever, play games. There's a lot of online games. We do a bunch of that. But also, I guess differently, I've used video a lot more this year to connect with my team. And that helps me because I have a very, very large team. So well, it's not a joy to be on the video, but it's great that I can speak to my team in their own time asynchronously. And we have AMAs, Ask Me Anythings. We have a lot of context. We have podcasts that come out frequently, a couple of times a week. We've just, like you said, Hefin, we've upped our communication big time throughout the pandemic so that we can share more context. And context is really, really key through times of change. So we are moving and growing so quickly that change management and the way that we would have traditionally thought about it, that just doesn't happen. So really it's about sharing context so that people can understand, oh, right, okay, I understand this. And so we're really focusing on that.
Brilliant. Thank you. We do have another question in the chat from Fiona. What would you consider the best agile tools and techniques to use with remote teams? I might ask you about that one, Rach, but they don't have to be agile tools. But yeah, what's from a technology perspective, what have you seen work well with your teams?
Yeah, so I actually, Sean taught me something that I've used a lot, and I kind of morphed it into my own version and combined it with different things. But we've done something that's been very, very cool, where I talked about it before, but we came up with a rallying cry across everybody. And then my leadership team, the senior leaders in New Zealand, we came up with our defining objectives for each thing. And then we used an improvement kata, which I'm sure Sean would share with you. There's a lot more than I can explain right now, to kind of go underneath each one of those defining objectives to basically define the ideal state. And then at each level of abstraction, what that ideal state would look like. And we use a Miro board to do this. There's many different tools, but we did that. So my leadership team did it. They took it to their teams and they used the same format, the same document with their teams to create, okay, well, what's our contribution to this? And soon, rolling out just after BFCM, they're going to be the team leads are going to be taking that to the support advisors and saying, hey, well, what does this look like in our team? So everyone can have their voice and have their contribution. And it's actually amazing the results that have come through. Like some of the things that are happening are bottom up from advisors doing really amazing work that we would never have considered or thought of or had time to achieve. And everyone's kind of, doing it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and retros, and there's a bunch, but.
Yeah, the Improvement Card is a really simple tool. There is a page on our website, actually. You can go there. There's a bunch of tools. So there's a bit of a how-to guide on the Improvement Card, which you can have a look at too. So I encourage you to have a look at that. It's sort of, there's a couple of times this has come up, but it just keeps replaying in my head, just the power of connecting people to the work. And, you know, it sounds so simple, and in practice, you know, it is slightly more complicated, but you know, connecting people to as much of the work that they do as you possibly can, it's just so powerful from both productivity and engagement. You can imagine if you were only responsible for this much of a piece of work that you were doing, which often happens in a contact center, and then to finish that interaction, it goes off somewhere else, and you never hear about what happens with it. Was it good or was it bad? Pretty soon you're going to become pretty disenfranchised and disengaged with the work. So, yeah, it's just as much as you can, focus on how you connect teams into that work every day. And daily stand-ups is just a brilliant way to do that. And start simple, start showing the teams the important metrics every day, and give them an opportunity just to have an insight about that. And then slowly you can build up to them making decisions on that. So big takeaway from me so far is that one. Arnie, any other questions in the chat, or should I go to the...
There's quite a few questions. And it might be good while we're talking about Agile. I was trying to get that improvement card to the group there, which I've managed to find. So I'm going to drop that into the chat. But I think Kylie asks, so following that question about the team sizes. So they're planning to implement more Agile techniques. I was wondering if a good team size for an IT project is roughly the same as for a contact center, looking to find/confirm the right size teams for stand-ups and retros, especially. I might actually go to you, Sean, just because I know you've had a lot of experience with Agile teams as well as contact center teams. Did you want to just quickly talk to that one?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously very different, those two teams. I think when you're trying to pick the right size for your contact center team, it's going to depend on like that span of control that you want to set up. It's going to largely depend on the type of work that your team is doing. If it's fairly repeatable work that, you know, is lower in complexity, you can have a bigger team. If it's less so, more multi-skilled, more complex, maybe a smaller team. For an IT project, again, my experience working with IT projects largely is going to depend on the kind of work that you're doing. And, you know, is it software development? How many, you know, devs and testers and BAs and all those kind of things do you need? So I would say one isn't really a proxy for another, if that was sort of where you were going with that. But I think you really have to look at the nature of the work that you're doing, you know, the cycles of value that you're trying to deliver. How often are you looking to do that as well? So, for example, are you working in 2-week cycles like sprints in your IT project, and how much you're expecting to get through in that time will largely determine, the size of the team.
I would also add, I would also add to that. Like someone once said to me, a good stand-up size is if you can share one pizza. That's the number of people. It's the pizza rule apparently. But that's one way to look at it. The other way is also to think about how do you slice the work up. So sometimes people go, we've got to stand up and we're going to stick to this and we're going to get everyone in because that's the only time we can do it. But actually, you might actually think about, well, does everyone need to be here? Can we slice the work up a little bit? So you have people who are there actually either doing two things. And this is what we say with all meetings, is that you're either providing value in a meeting, especially important in remote digital meetings, is that you're providing value or you're receiving value. And if you're not doing any of them, you should really question where you need to be there. So think about that when you're deciding whether it's a stand-up or a retro or whatever you're wanting to do. Hopefully that helps address that question, Kylie, but we're always open to talk a little bit more about agile teams as well. On this topic around tools and techniques, because I feel like that's almost a bit of a trend in some of the questions. So Jason asks, any ideas on how to do stand-ups with phone-based teams? Heffen, Rachel, are you guys doing stand-ups with your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. We and many of our different teams have taken the stand-up concept and really run with it. And I hope Sean doesn't mind me saying this, but we've essentially taken the concept and really tweaked it, adapted it. I'd like to say adapted it a whole lot towards our needs. And often these are for fairly lengthy projects that we're trying to break down, but also always require remote teams. I don't think any of our stand-ups are for teams that aren't remote. And for us, we rarely look at metrics in our stand-ups. It really is about initiatives and tasks, if you like, in order to progress things that are generally around change or things that need to be adaptable quite quickly to anything that we've come across. So we kicked off a new one this morning, for example, which is focused heavily on some of the productivity, proactive changes that we want our organization to do next year. So these are ones that you probably could get away with a large portion of the team not having access to the screen, but we do need them to. We use MS Teams as a base for ours, and we do expect the teams to basically update changes, call for helps, if you like, where we hit roadblocks or where the teams with the initiatives hit the roadblocks, so that it really becomes the stand-up needs to remain short, but is available to give an update, but also be an opportunity for input. One of the beauties we've got is almost all our knowledge is out there. We just need to reach it some way, and we often use our stand-ups in order to do that with those in a specific area.
I would say as well, with that question around the stand-ups, and also for Kylie, I suppose, is you may need to stagger or split your stand-ups if you've got phone-based teams, because they may not all be able to come off the phone all at once. So consider being as pragmatic as you possibly can and splitting those teams up. So you may run 2 or 3 stand-ups throughout the day, or it may just be more practical to only run 2 or 3 stand-ups across the week. So you obviously be pragmatic about it. Don't give up or abandon the idea of a stand-up just because you can't get everyone off at the same time. And then people can attend the ones that they can depending on their availability. That does work really well.
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging if you've had 2 or 3 stand-ups in a row with phone-based teams who haven't been able to really have a large amount of numbers. It forces you to think about how do we ensure the data is available beforehand, input beforehand if there's that risk as well for it.
Rachel, you said you do stand-ups too. Did you want to give some thoughts as well?
Yeah, we're actually just experimenting. We've always done jump-offs, we call them. But we have just experimented with not getting rid of them, but moving them into 2 large team times, and doing asynchronous communication because we used to do them for a lot of updates, but we're trialing kind of doing asynchronous. We use a program called Fallow, which is cool. Have a Google, it's good. And we also use Slack, and so we're kind of trialing that for some of those more updatey type things, and then instead being able to use that time for more kind of connection or getting deeper on the work. So we're just experimenting with that at the moment to see if that's better for our teams.
Great. So I might throw the next question to you, Rach. Talked a lot about connection and engagement and the impact on people and their well-being. So what are you seeing around well-being at the moment with your teams?
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of companies were very worried about people not working when they worked from home. Do you remember that? That was a big thing, that we were very worried about that. And I used to go along to the future of work events and talk about working from home, and everyone would be like, no, they're going to watch TV all day. I think that what we have found, and in fact, research has found that that's not the case. There was a really big study that's just been done by the National Bureau of Economic Research on 3.1 million workers in 21,000 different companies, and they found that people are working an extra hour per day, roughly 49 minutes, because they're working from home. So I think we were wrong about people not working, and in fact, actually, as someone said in the chat before, people are working a lot, and so instead we have a different challenge. And so really, as leaders, our job is to help people to self-regulate their time spent working, and really to exploit the freedom that we have from working from home. And I think this is a big opportunity for us all. And, you know, I know that when I say freedom and we talk about contact centers, that doesn't necessarily match, because we think about quite a structured schedule. But I actually think that this might be controversial, but that it's time to make be a bit more flexible around our schedule and how we are scheduling things, so that we can make sure that we are scheduling for well-being as well, and investing some money that we save from being in fancy buildings into how do we work on well-being. We yesterday had an amazing training session on resilience, and so we're really working hard on like giving people the tools and techniques and the things that they can do to shake off the day, and we have to talk about that, because it's, for some people it's really something they do naturally, and for other people it's not. It's a learnt skill. And so just the same way that we work in buildings, you know, when we're in offices, to kind of teach skills around how we work, and we have rules and ways that we work, like the culture, I guess, of like how we work, we have to do the same with the culture of how we work at home. So like, you know, I just said to my team the other day, hey, you know, I've got this podcast that I'm listening to, which is my work podcast. It's how our work shares our context. I'm going to listen to this while I go for a walk. You know, like there's no reason I have to actually listen to that while I'm standing at my desk or sitting at my desk. I'm going to go for a walk. And so what are the ways that we can lead and, you know, encourage well-being in a different work environment? And that's a challenge and different for every single organization of how we can actually achieve that. But that's going to be important.
Great point. Arnie, do we want to pick up that next question in the chat? I feel like it's a really good one.
Yeah, so Kylie, and this is for you, Rachel, again, and probably ties to what you've been talking about there, but Kylie asked, I would love to hear more from Rachel what she meant by connecting people to the work, and what does that mean?
I think you said that, Sean. About how to I'll claim it. No, well, I guess what it means to me is that it's really important. That's okay. He doesn't mind. But I think the purpose of the work. So often we can get very busy about we sectionalize our work into metrics, or we make it we distill it down so much so that people are not connected to the bigger picture. And we probably just don't spend enough time focusing on this, either as individuals or as teams, where we actually say, well, what actually is our purpose and what actually is it that we're trying to achieve? And like, so for me, like really practical examples, we're pulling out like snippets of calls and playing that back to our team and talking about, wow, that what you did there has helped somebody to, you know, achieve independence and achieve a livelihood in a time where they wouldn't have. You know, like, it's much bigger than customer service or tech support or you know, it's actually what our team is doing is actually helping people to achieve freedom, because commerce is freedom. And, you know, like, so we talk about that and we connect people to that, you know, that purpose. And basically that's my job. That's what I'm doing all the time whenever I can. And I listen to my team once a week. I spend an hour with the advisors, just one of them every week. They hate it, but I enjoy it. And then when I'm there, I watch them work, and then I just talk about it in a video and say, this is what I saw when I was watching Sean talk to one of our merchants, you know, and you know, so it's just like all the time connecting the dots. I call it connecting the dots. That's what we do as leaders.
Yeah, brilliant. The only thing I'd add to that is that I think this old world thinking that, unfortunately, as I said, we've grown up with, it was all about breaking the work down in smallest pieces as possible so that you could find these efficiencies. But, you know, work doesn't really work like that anymore. And the more you break down work and silo it down and sort of don't connect people back to the dots of interacting with these 50 customers a day, then what happens? The more they become disconnected from the work. So, yeah, I think that the power of meaning, as it's come through in the chat, the meaning in the work. What does this all mean? Why am I doing this? It's just so powerful. There's no metric you can find for that, but it absolutely works.
And that probably helps answer part of Abhilash's question, which was a bit earlier. And I might direct this one to Hefin, but Abhilash asks, remote work brought more meetings, meeting after meeting, like Hefin mentioned. So he's quoting you there, Hefin. While working from home brings the ease to join these meetings, but do you think they have the same effect or involvement as meetings in the office? Working from home is not going away, so how do we ensure everyone is involved and focused?
Yeah, quite a thorough question there in terms of trying to understand how do we break it down. I think from our perspective, this is it still comes back to the meaning point. I just want to extend that into this question a little bit more. Because I think that, and I think Eduardo's mentioned it a little bit in the comments as well, about the ease of measuring stats, and almost it's become easy to lock in meetings. And certainly from my perspective, we talk a lot at a leadership level. I've got a great HR business manager as well, and we often speak about this, about how do we ensure that our leaders also understand that purpose. And I think sometimes we can go along believing that, of course, our leaders will know their purpose, but sometimes we need to also stop and question and be certain, do we still understand the purpose? Are we still on the same page? How is that filtering through, particularly where you've got larger teams, where you're reliant on your team leaders in order to drive that and check in on that purpose and connect the dots, as Rachel mentioned, back to the purpose rather than go into the ease of stats. And that goes into the ease of meetings, if you like. Why are we holding that meeting? Are we holding it because we want to tell somebody that we've done something, or we want to check that some task has been done? And generally it's a case of, hey, I've had the opportunity to look at a stat. How do we flow through? So work from home, I agree, is not going away, right? I think it's there. What is the balance in the future? I really don't know, to be frank. And I think that I certainly hope that we'll get to this sort of balance, if you like, of understanding when we need meetings, and generally meetings around whether it's a traditional brainstorming or a workshopping or something where maybe that creativeness needs people together. Maybe that creativeness needs people in a room, but also how do you ensure that people who don't need a room full of people to be creative and to bounce ideas off can also be a part of those? it's something I think we're all learning a lot about at the moment, and I'm not sure that we have the answer. But I also want us all, and I guess the reason we have these sorts of calls is to try and learn. We should learn quicker than ever, I think, right now, because we don't really know what the right balance is.
We've kind of been edging towards this topic of trust, which is maybe it's. I think about the question before around the new leadership skills. Maybe it's not I wouldn't call it a skill per se, but what thoughts, Rach and Hefin, maybe I'll start with you, Rach, do you have on this concept of trust in leadership and the role that now plays in the contact center, world?
I think trust is really important. I think that it was legacy thinking, old style thinking, that we just couldn't trust people, and that's why we didn't want to work from home. It's one of the reasons why we did a lot of the things that we did in the office even. And I think that that research I said that showed that everyone was working an extra hour, there's so much that we thought was true and that we were wrong about. And I think we believe that you start with trust, and it doesn't mean you trust blindly. That's different. But you start with trust, and you believe in people, and you set up your system around that, and that you still have all those metrics. I mean, we live in a data-rich environment, so we've got things that if we need them, but we just don't start there. We don't set up our system based around a lack of trust. We set it up based around trust, and we believe in people. And the more you believe in people, people rise to your expectations of them. And that's true of 99% of people. And there's always a dickhead, but don't set up your whole system around that, is what I would say. Don't use that as the quote about that I said, by the way. I know what you're thinking, Arnie.
That's going to be the podcast snippet, that one. How about you, Hefin? Thoughts on trust? You're on mute.
It was going to happen.
I knew I would get the quote of 2020 into this. You're on mute, right? For me, trust has always been the foundation of any relationship, any team, anything that really also allows us to not need the metrics, if you like. So I think often leaders who feel a need to have metrics for their team, to manage the team, etc., it's generally because you haven't found an ability to find where that trust should lay with your people, right? And how do you do that? I mean, ultimately, it's about recognizing the outcomes for us anyway. For me, it's about recognizing that you don't need to see visually what people are doing on a day-to-day basis, but you have that reassurance that the outcomes are driving in the right manner, and it's usually through customer feedback, customer loyalty. These are the sorts of things that tell me whether or not we're doing the right thing, and whether or not those individuals who have taken on initiatives, stood up and said we want to do this, are doing it. And we should encourage, but you also need to allow trust to develop as well in that space.
Thanks, Stefan. The last thing I'd say on that before we will go into a couple of wrap-up questions is I suspect that there's potentially leaders need to trust themselves as well, as much as they need to trust their people. Trust yourself that you can lead in an environment like this. Do it safely. So do the things that Rachel spoke about, but I feel like that's the first hurdle to get over for many leaders. Certainly, speaking from experience, that was my battle. I had to trust myself that I could lead in a different way. So, final question. We're going to start to wrap things up. Where to from here then? What predictions, hopes, thoughts or ideas do each of you have for where is this all going to lead? All of this learning and disruption and heartache and pain and joy that we've been through, where is this going to lead us to? Rach, do you want to go first? Yeah,
I think it's very exciting what's going to happen in the world with this new way of working. I don't think it's going anywhere. There's 250 million desk jobs globally, and most of those will be able to be done from home by 2030, is the prediction. So I think in that environment, towns are going to rise again. World-class people are going to be working from all over the world, and moving to smaller towns for better cost of living and quality of life. I think that the professional home office is going to be a thing. In the last 20 years, the companies have been trying to make offices like homes, and now we're going to flip that, and we're going to try and make our homes a nice place to work. So I think that that's another thing. In our company, Shopify, we gave out a home allowance to try and make so that people could make their home office somewhere that was comfortable. And I do encourage people to, where they can, to be really clever about perks and benefits in a different world, thinking digitally first. Look, it's going to have an impact on climate change, because we're just not going to need to commute in the same way. Diversity, I think I talked about before, about how there is this way of working actually has great benefits for marginalized communities and for people that are not in big cities. And there is a real benefit to democratization of the ways that we work, which I'm very interested in and excited by. And that I talked before about introversion and extroversion, and I did see your comment, Fiona, in there. But yeah, it's really interesting how different things are going to rise to the top and rise to the surface, and we need to think about those things and be intentional about how we make sure we grab the really good things and think about how to, because there will be, I talk about the good things because I'm excited by working from home, but for some people there are things that they really don't like. So what can we do about changing that and being intentional to solve that problem in a digital first environment? And yeah, I mean, we're talking about the meetings thing, and interestingly, hobbies has been the number one thing that's really gone through the roof from a retail perspective over this period. So how can we use that as an advantage when we're working from home and say, hey, how can we incorporate more of you into your work? And instead of doing meeting after meeting after meeting, how can we find space in there so that you can do more of of what you love and, in your own community locally. So I think there's heaps of really cool things that we haven't probably thought enough about yet, that, we had however many years of working in offices, and we'd pretty much finely tuned that. And, we have to finely tune this. So don't expect it to be perfect right now, but get creative about creating what you want and the human experience that you want for you and your people.
Great, that's awesome. Thanks, Rach. What about you, Heffen?
Yeah, some great topics there, Rach. Absolutely nailed a lot of those. So for me, I also, the possibilities that this has opened up to us, right? And you touched on a few of them already. I would love us to take advantage of this momentum to refrain from going back to the norm, to make that available. I'm desperate for more of our guys to spend less time on the road and to actually be able to work from home more than they're even doing today in the middle of the pandemic. That requires some better digital connectivity to our customers, if you like, being able to be more innovative in terms of how we engage with our customers in that way. But also that should open it up. So those people who at the moment work for us and need to travel 2 hours to get into the center of Melbourne or Sydney because that's where the hospital is, well, hopefully if we can become more digital and remote savvy when it comes to this, they don't need to do that. And all the terrible stuff that does to the environment with spending, having 120 people driving around the country, 50,000 kilometers a year each on the road. So all of that good stuff that we really need to, I think, as leaders, hop on, drive that momentum, and make work a better place for all of us. And that's what I've enjoyed, if you like, to a degree, about what this has done to us. The disruption has really kicked us into that. Many of us had been involved in, wanting to do some pilots, if you like, around particularly video technologies and so forth to support each other in the past, and it was always a little bit slow, right? Particularly in healthcare, I'll be honest, it was always a little bit slow, and it was a little bit on the edge, and it's not focused on the core metrics, going back to that aspect that we have. Now, of course, we're all going, where was that technology? Because we need it today. We needed it yesterday. So the importance is to take those on board and really drive it and make work a little bit more open as well. I love what you touched on there, Rachel, about being able to bring diversity, maybe even open up roles that previously weren't available to certain people because of what the working environment could change to, and make it more amenable to people as well in that sense.
Cool, thanks, Stefan. All right, well, we're gonna wrap things up. I'll hand over to Arnie shortly, but yeah, I mean, I'd love to just say thank you to our panel today, and everyone that has contributed the questions. You've made it better than it was going to be with your input and your reflections. So thank you so much. The panel did not let us down. I think you guys definitely brought some of the gold there, and I think for me, it's reinforced some big things around that opportunity to innovate from this disruption, that opportunity that always brings. But just a big thing around leadership for me, and the opportunity for, I suppose, leaders to innovate themselves and how they look at things like productivity, those paradigms, smash those open and relook at how you consider those things. And I've spoken to a lot of leaders in the last 6 months, and the big thing that I've noticed is they're talking a lot more about their people. They're getting to know the whole person. They've been forced to engage more with the whole person because perhaps that distance has driven that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing those things become the hallmarks of what contact center leadership looks like and customer service leadership looks like going into next year. So thanks, guys. That was absolutely fantastic. Arnie, over to you.
Thanks, Sean. So we are about to approach the end. We just want to let you guys know a few things that we have. If you still want to stay connected or want to learn more, we do have a few things in the pipeline or things in place. So a couple of things. We've got the guide to the Agile Contact Center Leader. So you can get that from our website. I'd love for you to check it out. We've got some training that we do with people. This feels like, I feel like a car salesman here, but we do want to let you know if this is something that meets your needs, do check it out, because this is the sort of stuff we want to keep doing with people, because you all play a huge role in individual lives, and we feel like we'd love to be a part of that. So there's some training there. Go check that out. We do a podcast. Sean and I are co-hosts on the podcast, the Agile Contact Center podcast. We talk about some of the topics that you've heard about today already, and also a lot more. And the last thing is, we actually have a new offering that we would like to let you guys know first of. It's actually a free offering that we are doing. It's a 90-minute workshop that is customized. And really the purpose about this is about how do you kickstart something in your organization? How do you create that innovation in your team? How do you have the circuit breaker in your teams? And we'll come in, have a chat with you of what you'd like to do, and run a free workshop. No obligations, nothing like that. Gives you a taster. You might go away and go, hey, we can go do something. We've done this with a pilot with a couple of organizations, and they've gone, hey, this is great. We can go do something ourselves. And they haven't engaged with us further. That's okay. But you might think, hey, that might be something you might want to do as well. So those are a few things. Thank you to my co-host, Sean, or the host for today. You've done an awesome job, as always. And most of all, thank you to everyone who attended. It means a lot to us that you can come here and hear about this and be part of the conversation. We know an hour and 15 hour and a half is a long time out of your busy schedules. You all probably have to now get back into whatever meeting you have next. I apologize for that, but hopefully this has helped you think about 2021 in a more excited way and something that you've got a lot more hope for. And we'd love to continue that conversation with you. There's a survey when you exit out of this meeting. Please do fill that out. We want to keep improving these events and also do more events as well in the future. So we'd love for you guys to stay connected with us. But thank you again. Thank you all for joining us, and have an awesome day, an awesome rest of 2020.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It's where we cue the music. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. I'm going to bring this back to this view. Hethan, Rachel, how you guys feeling?
Great.
Good. Hey, how
Good.
good was that? Were the attendees? Some great little questions coming that way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Loved it. Thanks, guys.
No, that's
That's good. Thought provoking.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, some really great interaction, which was really nice.
Kylie said she's accidentally
Ali,
eavesdropping.
if you
I
just
can't
close,
see this.
just close it, it should bring you to a survey.
Awkward.
But you're welcome to continue staying.
That's all right, Kylie. There's still a few of you left. I think they might have walked away from their computer and realised we finished.
I think on your screen, Kylie, there should be an on-off switch. If you click that, you should be able to close. Like as soon as you leave this meeting, you'll get a link or a browser link for you to fill out a form. It's good. We've got Jacinta here from
JC still there?
JC. It's good. Yeah, I think if you just close the tab, it should come up. Otherwise, we'll get a survey out there'll be an email coming up as well to everyone. So we'll fill that
I
out.
think my husband was in here before. I hope he gives good feedback.
Oh, really? That could become very awkward over dinner if not.
That's right.
All right. Well, I think that's all.